She might wake up, and if not, at least the house is finally quiet. That's what my father said as I knelt beside my unconscious little sister. Her lips were pale, her breathing was shallow, and no one in the house seemed to care. My name is Alyssa Parker, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever looked at the people who raised you and realized you were never safe with them? I came home after a grueling 16-hour shift at the diner. My feet were blistered, my clothes smelled like burnt bacon and stress, and all I wanted was a shower and maybe, just maybe, 5 hours of sleep before my next shift. Instead, I walked into a tomb. The living room was dark, even though the sun hadn't set yet. TV on mute. My mother flipping through a magazine she wasn't reading. My father in his recliner, eyes half open, balanced on his gut. And there she was, Kaylee, my 13-year-old sister, curled up on the couch under a crocheted blanket, fast asleep. She okay? I asked. She's fine, Mom muttered, not looking up. I didn't think much of it. Kaylee always had trouble sleeping at night. Maybe she dozed off early. I kissed her forehead and went to shower. 3 hours later, I came back downstairs to get some water. She hadn't moved. I touched her shoulder gently. Kaylee. Nothing. I shook her lightly. Kaylee, come on. Still nothing. That's when the chill hit my spine. Mom. I called. Something's wrong. She's not waking up. Mom sighed like I'd just interrupted her spa day. Oh my God, Alyssa. She was being loud earlier, so I gave her something to calm down. My heart stopped. You gave her what? She shrugged. Just something over the counter. She wouldn't stop whining about being hungry. I needed quiet. I turned to my father, hoping for sanity. He didn't even blink. She might wake up. If not, finally some peace and quiet. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. They weren't human. They were statues. Cold, soulless statues. I called 911. My hands were shaking so bad, I dropped the phone twice. The paramedics arrived quickly. They checked her vitals, lifted her onto the stretcher, and wheeled her out. I rode in the ambulance, holding her hand, whispering to her like she could still hear me. At the hospital, they ran tests, and when the doctor came out with the report, I swear the room stopped spinning. She was given a high dose of sedatives not meant for children. She could have gone into cardiac arrest if you hadn't brought her in. I looked at the paper in his hand. I knew that name. Those pills didn't come over the counter. My parents had lied, and Kaylee could have died. And right then, I made a silent promise. They would never hurt her again, and they would never see it coming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside Kaylee's hospital bed, watching the heart monitor blink, steady and slow. Her small fingers twitched every now and then. I gripped her hand tighter each time, whispering, "Come back, baby girl. I've got you now." The nurses told me she'd be okay. The doctors said she was lucky, but I didn't believe in luck. Luck would have meant she was born to parents who didn't crush her spirit for breathing too loud. I stared at the bottle they found in her system, temozolom, a prescription sedative. Heavy, strong, and nowhere near over the counter. Where did my mother get it? I'd seen her pills before, antidepressants, thyroid meds, but never this. Then I remembered, last Thanksgiving, she got into an argument with her sister about borrowing medication. Aunt Carol had screamed something about Mom stealing from her cabinet again. It wasn't a one-time thing. That night, as Kaylee slept under hospital lights and machines hummed around us, I made a decision. I was going to get custody of my sister, but I knew I couldn't just walk into court and point fingers. No, that's what they'd expect from someone like me. Broke, tired, single, barely scraping rent with 2 jobs. So I started playing a game they never thought I could win. The next morning, I left the hospital after Kaylee was stable and in observation. She looked like a ghost wrapped in a blanket. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll be back before you open your eyes." Then I went back to the house. The door creaked open like it was tired of hiding secrets. My parents were in the kitchen, arguing about dinner. I didn't say a word. I walked past them, up the stairs, into the bathroom. I opened the medicine cabinet, and bingo, temozolom. 5 pills left in a bottle labeled with Aunt Carol's name. The expiration date scratched out with a marker. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Labels. Dosage. The full name. Then I turned the bottle over and saw a tiny sticker at the bottom. Controlled substance. Not for redistribution. Perfect. I walked back down and caught my father's eye. He narrowed his. Where the hell were you? Kaylee's still in the hospital, I said flatly. She might have died. Mom rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. She just needed rest. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just said, you're right. And that's when they should have known something was wrong. Because I never say that. That evening, I messaged my friend Maya, a legal assistant, and asked for help filing an emergency custody petition. And then I got real quiet. Because when you're planning revenge on people who never expected you to fight back, you don't shout. You whisper. The court clerk looked me up and down like I didn't belong there. Greasy ponytail, wrinkled uniform, circles under my eyes from 3 sleepless nights. I didn't look like someone who wins battles. But I wasn't there to win. I was there to protect what was left of my sister's soul. I'm filing for emergency custody, I said, sliding the papers across the counter. Immediate removal from a harmful household. She raised an eyebrow. Evidence. I placed the photos of the pill bottle in front of her. Clear. Time-stamped. Then I handed over the hospital report with Kaylee's toxicology results. Her tone changed instantly. We'll expedite this. A judge will review it by tomorrow morning. I nodded and left without a word. Back at the hospital, Kaylee was awake. She blinked slowly when I walked in, her voice barely a whisper. Did I do something bad? My chest cracked open. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. She looked away. Mom said I talked too much. Dad said I was annoying. I knelt by her side. They were wrong. And they are never going to hurt you again. I promise. She gave me a weak smile, then drifted back to sleep. And I felt it, that boiling in my chest. The kind that doesn't come from anger. It comes from betrayal so deep, it becomes fuel. I went home one last time that night, not to argue, not to beg, but to listen. They didn't notice me when I entered. The TV was loud, news channel blaring about something neither of them cared about. I'm telling you, my mother said, if she thinks she's taking Kaylee, she's insane. They'll never believe her. She's a waitress. My father laughed, slushing. She's nothing. Always was. I recorded everything. I stood in the hallway, invisible to them like I'd always been, and caught every word on my phone. And those pills, my mom continued. I flushed them. There's no proof. I smiled to myself. Too late. Proof already lived in my camera roll and in a hospital drawer. That night, I didn't sleep again. Instead, I wrote a letter to the judge in my own words. No legal language. Just truth. I told him about the time Kaylee came to me crying because Mom said she was too dramatic. The time Dad left her outside in the rain because she wasn't listening. The night she asked me if being alive was a mistake. I cried writing it. Not because I was sad, but because I was done letting them win. The next morning, I walked into court alone. No fancy suit. No lawyer. Just my calloused hands, my trembling heart, and a flash drive full of evidence. The judge read in silence. 5 minutes later, he looked me in the eye and said, Miss Parker, I'm granting temporary custody of your sister. Effective immediately. I swallowed a sob. Then I walked out of that courtroom not as a waitress, not as a nobody, but as someone my sister could finally call home. I picked Kaylee up from the hospital that evening with a backpack, a permission form, and a blanket I'd brought from home, the one she used to hide under whenever Mom screamed. She didn't say much on the drive, just stared out the window, watching the sun bleed into the horizon like it was trying to escape, too. When we pulled into my tiny apartment lot, she looked at the rundown building, the cracked steps, the flickering light above the hallway door. "This is where you live?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, turning off the ignition. "It's not much, but no one here will ever drug you or call you a burden." She gave a small nod, gripping the blanket tighter. That first night, we slept on the same mattress. No furniture, no space, just survival. But there was peace. No yelling, no footsteps that made her flinch. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my voice softly reading from the same old library book we used to sneak under the covers when we were kids. She fell asleep before I finished the second page. The next few days, I worked double shifts and still managed to walk her to school. I packed her lunch every morning, wrote her tiny notes on napkins. "You're stronger than you know. I believe in you." But I wasn't stupid. I knew my parents wouldn't let this go without a fight. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got a letter. Not a call, not a message. A letter, official, cold, and full of venom. They were suing me for parental alienation and emotional manipulation. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Like snakes crying victim because someone built a fence. I sent the letter to Maya, my friend from legal aid. She read it and texted, "We're not just gonna respond. We gonna bury them." The court date was set, 2 weeks out, and in those 2 weeks, I became someone else. I stopped reacting emotionally and started moving strategically. I gathered every text, every photo, every voicemail where my mother mocked Kaylee or my dad threatened to send her away if she kept whining. I found neighbors who heard things, teachers who saw the bruises Kaylee claimed were from falling. Even one former babysitter who quit because she said the household smelled like rage. Every piece of their cruelty was now my weapon. But I didn't stop there, because I knew court didn't care about sad stories. They wanted facts, records, and I was about to give them both, on a silver platter. The day before the hearing, I sat with Kaylee on our little second-hand couch. She looked nervous, picking at a loose thread in her sleeve. "What if they win?" she asked. "They won't," I said gently. "But if something goes wrong, I swear to you, I'll never stop fighting. Not for a second." She looked up at me, eyes tired but believing. "For the first time," she whispered, "I feel safe." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. Because I knew, once this was over, I wasn't just fighting for custody. I was fighting to expose everything they'd done. In front of the same world that once believed they were the perfect parents. The courtroom smelled like stale paper and worn-out excuses. Kaylee sat beside me, her small hand tucked into mine, her hair neatly braided like Mom used to promise but never do. She wore a navy blue sweater I found at Goodwill and shoes a size too big, but she held herself like a soldier. My parents entered 20 minutes late. My mother wore a smug little smile like she'd just finished a spa day. My father didn't even bother with a tie. They didn't look scared. They looked entertained. Like this was all a game. Like we were the ones being judged for daring to speak. The judge opened the file and adjusted his glasses. "Today we'll be hearing the matter of Parker versus Parker for the permanent custody of minor Kaylee Parker. Miss Alyssa Parker, you filed allegations of abuse and medical negligence. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And the defendants claim you are emotionally manipulating the child for separation." "They're lying," I said. "Calm, measured. I can prove it." The defense lawyer, a woman in a stiff gray suit with a voice that could chill water, stood up first. She's a waitress with no legal training, barely surviving on her own. And now she wants full custody. She's emotionally unstable, living in poverty, and has poisoned the child against her biological parents. My father folded his arms smugly. My mother smiled like she was already tasting victory. But then it was my turn. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I plugged in a flash drive, loaded the evidence on the screen, and pressed play. Feist, the audio. My mom's voice, sharp as broken glass. She was being loud, so I gave her something to shut her up. Then Dad's voice. If she doesn't wake up, maybe we'll finally have some peace. The courtroom went dead silent. Second, photos of the pill bottle, the label, the expiration, the name that wasn't hers. Then the hospital report, projected on the screen, listing the drug, dosage, and risk of overdose. I turned to the judge. She didn't make a mistake. She drugged a child. On purpose. The defense tried to object. Claimed the audio was edited. Claimed the bottle was planted. So I called the doctor who treated Kaylee. He took the stand and said, had her sister not brought her in when she did, the girl could have suffered permanent damage, possibly death. The substance found in her bloodstream was dangerous and not prescribed to her. Silence again, except for the sound of my mother's jaw tightening. Then the judge asked the last question. Kaylee, would you like to speak? I looked at her, gave her the smallest nod. She stood up, trembling, but strong. My mom says I'm too much, she said. My dad says I should be quiet. But Alyssa listens. She makes me feel like I matter. I want to stay with her. Just that. And it was enough. The judge didn't even take a recess. Effective immediately, he said. Permanent custody is granted to Alyssa Parker. All parental rights of the defendants are hereby revoked. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled Kaylee into my arms as my mother gasped. Furious. My father stood up like he might speak, but the bailiff stepped forward before he could. They'd lost. Not just custody. Control. Power. Their image. And I wasn't done yet, because I was about to show the world what they did. The silence in that courtroom didn't end with the gavel. It followed my parents out the door. It followed me into the hallway where the press hadn't shown up yet. But silence can be temporary, because I wasn't finished. They may have lost custody, but they hadn't lost the narrative. And I knew people like my mother. She'd spin this like a misunderstanding, a bitter daughter making up lies to steal her sister. So I made sure her lies wouldn't stick. That night, after Kaylee fell asleep clutching her stuffed bear like it was the last real thing left in the world, I got to work. I posted one photo, just one. Kaylee's hospital bracelet wrapped around her tiny wrist. Caption: she almost didn't wake up. And her parents called it peace. Then I logged off. By morning, it had 11,000 shares. I never said names. Didn't have to. People from our town knew. Teachers, church folk, neighbors who looked away for years. They were tagging each other in comments like wildfire. Is this who I think it is? I knew something was off in that house. She once told me Kaylee was too sensitive. I should have said something. By noon, a local journalist messaged me. By that evening, the story was live. Local parents lose custody after alleged drugging incident. Sister saves child just in time. The article blurred names, but not enough. Mom called me that night. Private number. I answered. Her voice cracked like old wood. You're humiliating us. No, I said. I'm telling the truth. If that humiliates you, maybe you should have lived differently. She hung up. I blocked the number. A week later, CPS knocked on my door. Not to investigate me, but to open a formal inquiry into my parents. They'd read the reports. They'd seen the evidence. And now they wanted to know how long it had been going on. I handed over everything I had. Emails, voice memos, even the video Kaylee secretly recorded one night of Dad slamming the cabinet and yelling when she cried over her broken school shoes. They were building a case, not just for neglect, for criminal child endangerment. Meanwhile, I focused on healing. I signed Kaylee up for art therapy. I decorated our small apartment with dollar store stars and chalkboard paint. We made lists of things we wanted to do now that she was free. Go to the beach. Eat pancakes for dinner. Start middle school without fear. Sleep through the night. Small things. But for us, they were everything. And every night before bed, she'd ask, "Do I have to go back?" And every night, I'd say, "Not a chance." One night, as we sat watching cartoons on my laptop, she looked at me and whispered, "Do you think they'll ever change?" I paused, then said, "People like them don't change. But people like us, we get stronger." And she smiled, not the scared kind, not the polite kind, the kind of smile that knows it survived. The court order was final. The CPS investigation was ongoing. But trauma doesn't follow paperwork. It lingers, in shadows, in silence, in the way Kaylee flinched when someone shut a door too hard. I could protect her now, but I couldn't erase what had already been done. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I kept showing up. Every day. When she had nightmares, I stayed awake with her. When she asked the same questions over and over, why did they hate me? I gave her new answers every time, not to change the past, but to rewrite the story she told herself. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Maya. Her voice was shaking. "Alyssa, check your email. Now." I opened it. It was a CPS referral notice. Not just about Kaylee. About 3 other children. All of them connected to my parents. A cousin who used to act out and was sent to a facility at 12. A neighbor's kid who mysteriously stopped coming over after a sleepover. A babysitter's sibling who said she felt weird around my dad. They were never just cruel to Kaylee. They were a pattern. CPS wanted my testimony, not just as a guardian, but as a witness. They were considering pressing charges against my parents for historic abuse and negligence. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the wall while Kaylee colored butterflies on the kitchen table. The weight hit me all at once. If I moved forward with this, I wouldn't just be taking them down as a sister. I'd be taking them down as a witness in a legal case. There would be hearings, depositions, maybe even trial. And Kaylee would grow up knowing that the people who birthed us were on public record as monsters. But I thought about those other kids, and how no one showed up for them. And then I thought of Kaylee, smiling now, safe, eating cereal like it was a gift. So I said yes. In the weeks that followed, I gave every detail I could remember. The time my mom slapped Kaylee for crying during a movie. The day my dad locked her outside in the cold because she forgot her backpack. The nights I heard them yelling through the walls, calling her useless. It wasn't easy. I shook. I cried. I almost threw up in the courthouse bathroom. But I didn't stop. Because truth doesn't care about how uncomfortable it makes you. It just waits for someone brave enough to say it out loud. The prosecutor called me after my 3rd deposition. "We're preparing charges," he said. "But I need you to know, this could go public." "I don't care," I said. "Just make sure they can't do this to anyone else." That weekend, I told Kaylee. She looked scared at first. Then, quietly, she whispered, "Are you scared?" I thought about it. Then I said, "Yeah, but I'm not stopping." She nodded and went back to drawing. This time, it wasn't butterflies. It was a girl standing in front of a giant wall with a sledgehammer in her hand. And I knew in that moment, she understood what we were doing. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were tearing the whole thing down. The courtroom looked different this time. Not because the walls changed or the chairs were new, but because this time, my parents weren't seated with confidence. They weren't smirking. They weren't even looking at me. My mother stayed at the table, jaw locked, hands shaking. My father kept fidgeting, his tie too tight around a throat that had told too many lies. This wasn't family court anymore. This was criminal court. The prosecutor stood and laid it all bare. Count after count of child endangerment, negligence, unauthorized use of prescription medication, and obstruction. 3 kids, years of incidents, too many people who looked the other way, and 1 person who didn't. Me. When I took the stand, my voice didn't shake this time. I told them everything. From the moment I walked in that night after my 16-hour shift, to the way my mother casually confessed like it was no big deal. to how my father said, "Maybe now we'll have peace." The courtroom was silent. The jury leaned forward. The judge watched me like he already knew the truth, but needed to hear it aloud. And when I finished, I looked directly at my parents. They didn't look back, because they knew the story they spent their lives trying to control now belonged to me. The verdict came fast. Guilty, both of them. My mother cried when the sentence was read. 6 years minimum with no early parole. My father didn't cry. He just looked at the floor, shoulders caved in, like the weight of his cruelty had finally found its way home. I walked out of that courthouse into a sky so bright it hurt my eyes. But it didn't matter, because Kaylee was waiting on the steps, her arms wrapped around a stuffed bear, wearing the same sweater from our first night in that apartment. She ran to me. I scooped her up. "I hide," she whispered. "They're not coming back." I shook my head. Not ever. We didn't go home right away. We went to the ice cream shop down the street. Sat in a booth by the window. She ordered bubblegum with sprinkles. I just watched her laugh. Really laugh. Not the scared kind. Not the fake kind. The kind of laugh that's earned after fire. A few months later, I got a letter from the judge. He thanked me, said that my courage had opened doors for other children to be heard. Inside the envelope was a certificate, not a fancy one, not official, but in handwritten ink. It read, "Thank you for breaking the cycle." I hung it on the wall above Kaylee's drawing of the girl with the sledgehammer, because that's who she is now. That's who we both are. No longer victims, but builders of something better. And that night, after I tucked her in and turned off the lights, she whispered, "I love you, Alyssa." I sat on the edge of her bed, brushed her hair back, and said, "I love you more, and you're safe now, always." And for the first time in forever, we both slept through the night.